Hello, friends. We've seen in our previous episodes how me, and for that matter, maybe even you, is a fusion of two civilizations, the modern civilization and the Indic civilization. And then we looked at the comparisons between the two, and we found that the modern civilization would never outlasted more than 700 years so far in history, and the Indic has been running strong for the last 17,000 years at least by conservative standards. So we found that in the longevity there's been a big difference. We then also tried to look at other facets. We also touched upon legal systems and the law. And we found that in the modern civilization, law is based on the premise that the modern law is based on the premise that the state can do no wrong. And yet in the Indic systems, the king was always a servant of the people, and he was not above board, and he was also subject to the same laws. So that made a big difference. And then we examined a few aspects of that. Today we'll also look at some of the other things where we probably different from each other, and we are going to touch upon what could be the differences in economic principles. Now, why is this important? Why? Because any times a civilization is based upon some very basic principles that drive it, because the principles then drive collective thought, and the collective thought drives collective actions and outcomes. So that's why principles are important to examine, and we will look in this context the economic principles of the two civilizations. When I look at the modern civilization and I try to understand what were the economic principles driving it, well, it first started with colonialism, which fueled the industrial revolution, and the colonialism lasted roughly maybe about 200 odd years, and then it collapsed. It is an aggressive system. I don't think I got to talk anything about it further. Then we look at some of the other systems. Let us say we picked up on communism. We know that communism, which was supposed to be a very, very altruistic system, ended up not lasting beyond 70 years, and it had so many ills. You can see what has the recent history of the last 100 years is there in front of you for you to compare, and then see what communism did to various societies and what damages it's doing even today. So communism never really gained ground beyond 70 years. And then if you look at capitalism, well, capitalism is what, 150 years or maybe 100 years old so far. And free market capitalism, today we would think that free market capitalism in a democratic society is probably still the best option. Yes, it might be, but before we put that stamp and then think we can do nothing better, let's just hold it there and then check if everything's okay. But we do find that in the modern world today, this whole concept of individual, and the individual being at the center of everything, that competition is win at any cost, this free unbridled capitalism, well, it had its ills. And that is why you had this whole churn within society where they wanted to bridle this kind of a capitalism to some extent, because it gives rise to one set of very prosperous people and another set of very, very poverty stricken people. So the divide between the two in terms of wealth becomes very severe through capitalism. So that is an ill that we have not fixed till today. I mean, we have tried things like globalization. Now globalization is already seeing its death just within 25 years. And what else now beyond globalism? I don't know. We're all going back to to individual countries and individual economies and whatnot, and we're still experimenting with the concepts of capitalism, with so many faults like the prime issue, subprime issue in the US, and the global meltdown, etc., and the untold misery it brings about on people. So it's not a perfect system still. And if I would compare that with the Indic systems, and then I look at the Indic societies, and we realize that firstly, the Indic society, by some recent studies on GDP for the last 2000 years, it's observed for at least a good part of these 2000 years, almost till 1700 years, the Indic societies have maintained 33% to 30% of GDP, of world GDP. Now that tells you a level of prosperity. I mean, even today, the US, being the most prosperous, has not seen prosperity for beyond 250 to 300 years so far. 200 years is at best that they're prosperous. But the Indic systems have been prosperous like that for almost 1700 years. And that's a big time. And if we look prior to that and we checked out, the whole, I mean, we have not even checked 5000 BC to number 1 AD, that 5000 years, no doubt India had been at the forefront of all civilizations. The Indus Valley civilization is also another proof of very, very egalitarian kind of living, where they seem to have been fantastic. They had a great quality of life. I mean, even the Romans did not have underground drainage systems, but then those guys 2 to 3,000 years prior to the Romans had underground drainage systems, had paved roads, had not much disparity between the haves and have-nots, and a fantastic society. That is the kind of society it's come. And what was that based upon? Even now, if you look at some of the hangovers of that system, one way is to look at that the competition is not against the other. The competition is with yourself, because that is where you have a level playing field. You can only compare with yourself, and so compete with yourself, not with the other person. The Marwadi community is a great example of this. There are certain, I think it's in Gujarat, Mori or someplace, check it out. That also is a great place for these cottage industries and the cooperative systems that have come up. These are societies where people go bankrupt, but then they bounce back. It is not like that such a fantastic guy, the owner of Coffee Day, who committed suicide because he went bankrupt. That does not happen in a Marwadi community. You can always come back, and yet you will bounce back, and you will come back, and you'll be able to set right things and proceed. So everybody prospers, some more, some less, but everybody prospers. So there is a marked difference in the way the economic principles had been working then and the economic principles that we have now adopted. So is it a time to check and study these changes and see if there's something hidden that we could probably once again unearth and then bring it back to the modern society so that we can probably prosper from it? Yes, absolutely. So we should look at some of those and then check them out. So once again, friends, I hope you liked this episode. Keep watching. The next one, we will look at maths and science in the current modern civilization and the Indic civilizations, and go further. Thank you for listening to me.